Eliav, there's two things that are wrong with your site. He goes, you need photos of happy people. Stop putting just pretty photos of balloons. He goes, you need to show the experience and what it's really like at that moment of that joy and of really people. And I was like, okay, makes sense. So I got him a bunch of people photos, right? And then the other piece was the language, because I'd put in a lot of SEO and a lot of words, right, to make sure that I was ranking, because we started ranking number one for tons and tons of stuff, right? And I started using ChatGPT about 2 years ago, like through Jarvis, which was like one of the early AI writers, or Jasper, and I just wrote like, use the tone of Robin Leach, right? Like the guy from The Rich and Famous. And I go, use descriptive adjectives. I started like relearning the English language that I did not care about. And I was never an amazing writer. And all of a sudden I was like, use similes, use descriptive storytelling, use like wanderlust adjectives and tantalizing adjectives around descriptions. And all of a sudden, like my words that I already built would turn magical where the feeling was there. Like so powerful.
Are you interested in adding multi-day to your day tour business? Are you looking to understand growth and scale strategies in the multi-day world? Looking to finally crack the technology stack you need to organize, automate, and grow your business? Then join Tourpreneur in Seville, Spain for Tourpreneur Connect. Sponsored by We Travel, Yuli, and ABAC DMC Spain, November 27th to 30th, 2023, for an event unlike any other in our industry. Open to strictly 100 operators. Pete, Mitch, Chris, and other industry experts will guide you through the do's, don'ts, twists, and turns of running a multi-day tour business. Not only that, Tourpreneur are giving back as we will be bringing in local suppliers and businesses to help us run the event. We're also opening up to a number of locally based tour operators who can attend for free. So join Tourpreneur in Seville for Connect November 27th to 30th, 2023. And join us for an unforgettable experience of learning and connection in one of Europe's most unforgettable cities. Visit tourpreneur.com/connect for more info.
All right, I'm excited today. I've got Eliav Cohen from Seattle Ballooning sitting with me. Hey, Eliav, thanks for coming along.
Hey, how you doing, Matt?
So I'm excited about this. I have wondered for the longest time why I've never seen a hot air ballooning company do multi-day tours. And that was the spark that caused me to reach out to Eliav. He's got a lot of passion, a lot of excitement. But Eliav, why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, my name's Eliav. I'm the chief pilot and the owner of Seattle Ballooning. And we essentially had done daily tours in front of Mount Rainier in Seattle here since 2016. Launched at the location in Walla Walla over the vineyards, flying over grapevines. So we had that. And then my dream was always, since the day I'd gotten my commercial license, was to recreate the multi-day balloon tour of this guy named Buddy Bombard from the 80s and 90s, who is probably the best tour operator to ever live. And I know that's like a big thing to say, but he really did. And what he had created with like the luxury tour world, when it was like challenging to like get in touch with people, and the 80s
Right.
and 90s and early 2000s. Yeah. So we've recreated that again and are now doing multi-day, 3, 5, 7-day, ridiculous worldwide balloon tours with hot air balloons.
Man. So you just talked about getting a commercial license though. That's to run a hot air balloon business, right? To become hot air balloon pilot.
So it's just to be able to fly the balloons, not run the business. There's a lot of people that become commercial balloon pilots because it allows you to train other people to fly balloons. And that's part of the biggest challenge in ballooning in general, is that it's mostly full of a bunch of elderly white guys who are like in their 70s, who've been flying balloons since the 1980s or 70s. And it's hard to get new people in because it's kind of like one of those, you have to buy a hot air balloon in order to become a pilot in general. So you can't like rent a balloon. So it's a very, very small niche of people that become pilots. And it's almost like someone who gets into yachting, or like it's a very specific and challenging group with you have to have a lot of expendable income in order to even get into the sport, and then want to be able to,
Right.
have fun and do rides for a living.
Why can't you rent a hot air balloon?
So in general, like when you rent a plane, right, it's very, very simple, right? Because they can repair them easily. You're not worried about a lot of stuff. But in a balloon, because it's fabric and you're only using the winds to control where you're going, there ends up being a lot of repair on new student pilots, right?
Yeah.
Or you may have a $100,000 or $150,000 balloon, and you don't want to necessarily ruin that of having a brand new student learn to fly it. So how it typically works is either you go to a 141 school, right, to learn how to fly hot air balloons, and you'll pay probably 10 grand just even to do, your private license. And then you don't even have a balloon when you're done. So the easiest way to get into ballooning is to buy your own balloon for 15, 20 grand. And then local balloon pilots will basically train people for free or for just like $100, or you buy them breakfast, because we want people to get into the sport. And so that's why pretty much everyone just buys their own hot air balloon, and there aren't really even hot air balloon clubs where like people share them. Really, everyone has to own your own hot air balloon. So when I got into it, I literally spent $7,500, bought a balloon before I'd ever, had a single hour of training. And then you learn on your own equipment and your own system, which is amazing.
So you went to the hot air balloon shop? Hot air balloons are us?
It's called Facebook. Yeah.
Facebook?
So basically the Facebook group, right? And there's, balloon repair stations that kind of know whose balloons are out of annual or who needs to get out of ballooning in general. And I found a 75-year-old lady who was very wonderful, a nurse out of Rio Rancho in Albuquerque, or New Mexico. And I told her how passionate I was, how excited this is, like 22-year-old kid or 23-year-old kid wanting to get into ballooning. And she gave me a great deal on the balloon, and I bought my first balloon. And then I literally after that started learning how to fly it and did all my training.
I have heard before that people in hot air ballooning are nuts, right? It's like...
Well, they call them aeronuts, right? Or balloonatics, right? Because when you're a balloon pilot, you're called an aeronaut, right? I won't say it's, nuts. I'd say that the fixed wing pilots find ballooning fascinating because they're like, we can control where we're going. How do you control where you're going? And what's fascinating is they're very surprised when I'll launch from one airport and we will land at another airport only using the winds to control where we're going. And that's why ballooning is very much an art and a skill. And some people are, as the FAA says, hot air balloons are unsteerable aircraft. However, some pilots tend to be better at steering them than others. And I happen to be one of those that are a little bit.
So I'm just wondering, when it comes to hot air balloons, and I will talk about them all today stuff in a second, right? But part of the purpose of this whole podcast is just for me to scratch itches.
Sure.
And people can join me along the way, right? All the questions that you never thought you had about hot air balloons. So when it comes to hot air balloons, right? When you go, I'm not really that into hot rods or anything like that, but the way I imagine it is if you're hanging around a bunch of people who own vintage cars, and then someone rocks up with like this incredible Dodge Charger or something like that, and it's just from 1964 or some year that matters in the world of cars, and everyone's like, oh my god, and the whole room stops and they're whistling and all that sort of stuff. In hot air balloons, is there a similar kind of thing? Like someone rocks up with a vintage 82 basket or something like that, and everyone's just like...
So I do have a vintage balloon. It's from 1965. It was the 12th balloon ever built. And it is absolutely terrifying in every way. So no one wants to fly old fabric balloons from the 60s, but we do inflate them at events, and it's cool to look at, and all the balloonists kind of dork out. We call it a balloon porn. And it's burners. So it's literally the burners can get very designed and are beautiful. And these brand new burners are sexy. They are beautiful, and you pick the colors, and they're shiny, and they put out different amounts of power, and that's where people get excited is about the burners. And then the envelopes, you really are designing them when you're getting them built. Each one is custom. So a brand new balloon, it's just beautiful. The colors, or you've got special shaped balloons. You can get a There was a guy named Malcolm Forbes, right? Billionaire Malcolm Forbes. He had 12 special sheet balloons. He had the Taj Mahal turned into a balloon, and he had the Sphinx turned into a balloon, and an elephant balloon. Like, you can really turn anything to a special shape, and that's kind of like the coolest of the cool, right? Is stuff like that.
Right.
But as far as equipment, it's the brand new coolest equipment.
Burner.
It's beautiful, and those
Right.
burners are gorgeous. And then having balloons that are fully printed of every
So
panel, gorgeous.
So what's the equivalent? So cars have horsepower, right? Burners have.
These are BTU, so it's how hot, quiet, and focused the flame is. So old balloon burners, the flames kind of went out a little bit, right? It wasn't a real. It was a little orangey, right, or red. But the new burners are just blue, coming straight up candlestick. And when you two burners, it's how then they cross to come together with the flame to just create a very tight burn, which helps make
Two
sure you never
burners.
burn fabric. But it's also they're ridiculously powerful compared to even burners from 10 years ago.
So what's a high level of BTU? What's a big number?
32 million BTU on each burn. So if you imagine your barbecue's 70,000, I'd say
Right.
that's pretty hot.
So you'd be like walking up to a balloon, you'd be like, "Oh man, is that a double burner 32 or something like that?" Is what you guys say? I'm trying to
I mean,
imagine this internal
you will
world.
see it, and balloonists know the new burners. Like it's
Right.
like one of those cool things that whoever has them, and you also have people have different colors on them or all kinds of stuff. So, for me, I just want since we fly commercial balloons, I just want the most powerful burners on the market that are correct for that size balloon.
But it's not like there's that many hot air balloons in the world. Who's manufacturing these burners?
So there's actually 5 major manufacturers in the world, and that's it, right? So you've got
Major.
Cameron in the United States, Lindstrand in the United States. Those are 2 main American companies, those ones that we use. Then there's Kubitschek balloons out of old Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic. They have beautiful balloons that are amazing. And then you've got Ultra Magic in Spain, and then you've got Kavanagh in Australia, and that's it. That's all the balloon manufacturers. Then you got some weird, like, small ones that are starting Cappadocia and other places where there's a lot of ballooning. They're starting to build their own balloons, and they're just copying the other companies and, trying to create their own equipment.
Right. I'm on the Cameron Balloons website right now, checking out their burners. Looks pretty badass. That's amazing. So let's talk about safety. It's a common topic that you must get. It must be in the FAQs on your website.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. I started the American Ballooning Safety and Training Association as a because you have the Balloon Federation of America, which is the main federation that had been created in the 1960s by Ed Yost, one of the founders of ballooning. And what I found was that the Balloon Federation of America was not doing the job that I wanted them to do around safety, PR, because when something happens in the world, right, and I'm going to give you an example of something, that happened yesterday, which is weird timing, right? In Mexico, there was a balloon accident where there was a pilot and the basket caught on fire, and we all started looking at, well, what happened? Well, we discovered very quickly is that the tanks weren't even aircraft tanks. They were literally like some random warehouse propane tank. The burner and the envelope didn't go together, and which is completely illegal and unsafe. And it's because of those types of things in the United States, we have such safety because we have amazing regulation with the FAA and we have balloon repair stations and people that understand safety. And that's why, in third world countries, there are challenges because they don't have that type of overlook or oversight over the equipment. And that's why in general in aviation, there's more issues in third world countries. In America, the status that balloons are the safest form of all aviation, only due to the fact that we only fly in good weather. And there's very, very little issues with pilots in general compared to fixed wing or any other aircraft. There just aren't accidents and issues. And when they do happen, they get blown up worldwide because, it's a balloon. Oh my gosh, right?
Is it just a...
So
Yeah.
that's what I would say is it's safer right now for you to go on a balloon than for you to drive to go ballooning. It is much safer for you to go on a balloon. And that's why we, and even in the state of Washington, we haven't had an issue since 1970 where someone broke an ankle. That was in 1970. So it's really around the communities, the safety, and the training that we all do in America to make sure that we have safe flights.
Are there any countries that you would be nervous to jump in a balloon?
Me knowing ballooning,
Yes.
I would check certain things hey, do they have an annual on the balloon? Right. And I understand the equipment and know what to look for. But in general, if you're going with major companies anywhere in the world, you're pretty good. If it's if you're in Mexico, you want to make sure you're in a high end, like the top larger ones, companies. You wouldn't want to go the small ones. Same thing in like Vietnam or Thailand or, Malaysia. Certain in third world countries, they just don't have the same oversight. And it's not to say they aren't great pilots. It's just there's a very, very big difference of would you be willing to go on a Delta flight versus some random airline that is having lots and lots of issues all the time. That's kind of the difference. So I would say I check airworthiness documents. And if I'm going anywhere, I'm going to make sure they're doing everything right. And if I have friends going to Egypt, I'm telling them, hey, go fly to the pyramids, but fly with one of the large balloon companies and make sure these are the things to look for and ask.
Cool. So why is ballooning so expensive? That's one of the things I've always wondered. So for one of our guests to go hot air ballooning in India, it's like $400, right? Something like that.
We actually charge, $375 per person for sunset flights and $325 for sunset where we fly. The balloon itself ends up being about a $200,000 rig.
Okay.
Right. So between the balloon, the whole balloon system, the truck, the trailer, the van to carry passengers, you're looking at about $200,000 to take 10 people in a balloon. So on our flights, that 10 passenger balloon is making about $3,700. We have about an 80% profit margin, right? So we have good profit margins, but what it allows us to do is then buy new equipment of new balloons every 600 hours. We buy new balloon equipment, so it's fresh, it's good. We know that couldn't possibly be an issue with it. So that's part of the reason. And then you have propane costs is expensive, crew, and then you have professional pilots. You're putting your life in someone's hands. So you have to ask yourself, if you were to go skydiving, would you want to go with a discount skydiving company that uses old parachutes? Probably not. It's the same way with ballooning. So we are the most expensive by 30%, but we also have the best possible safety record because we don't fly in anything weird because we don't care. So we only fly in great weather and we can ensure people's safety because of that with great balloon equipment. So that's why I'd say it's so expensive, but I don't think it's expensive if you're trusting someone's with your life to go in a, fabric balloon in a wicker basket to thousands of feet in the sky, right?
Right. It also occurs to me that you can only fly once a day. Is that right?
Twice a day. Some day areas only once. So you fly only at sunrise and sunset because that's when the winds are the most consistent.
Okay.
But if it's the middle of winter, you could fly at 2:00 in the afternoon because there's no temperature change causing weird winds.
Right. And you mentioned before that pretty much everyone's kind of 60s and 70s white dudes who got into the sport decades ago, right? So that must mean that, firstly, that there are balloon companies coming up for sale right now. Is that happening?
It's not that there are some balloon companies that come up for sale. There's one in California that they're trying to sell for $12 million. It's a large operation. There are ones for sale, but ultimately when you're in ballooning, you're really creating it from scratch each time because you have your own balloon and you start flying small groups and then you get a little larger balloon. For me, I was always in marketing and sales before I got into ballooning. So I look at it as like, I built it as a tech company. I didn't build it as we just happened to fly balloons. But I use tons of AI. I use all kinds of conversion stuff and all my learnings from working with giant unicorn billion-dollar companies over the years. That's where I learned all the skills and how we built our company. But most people don't buy another company. They just kind of move up in their size of their balloon and then slowly, hodgepodge a website. I think it's probably like a lot of tour operators, right? Like you have your passion and you just kind of throw it together. And then there's other people that come from different industries that go, oh, wow, this is really easy if I could take that knowledge and then happen to do what I love.
Right. Yeah, actually, in Australia, you're probably aware of this, but not many people outside of ballooning would be. And no, tell me if you're aware of this. So there was an Australian company, is an Australian company, present tense. They started buying up all the skydive companies around Australia, right? They're called Experience Co. I think they were called Australian Skydiving Company beforehand, but now they're called Experience Co. And they're listed on the Australian Stock Exchange because you need a very small minimum in revenue to list on the Australian Stock Exchange. And they started just acquiring every single skydive company they could, because there's like limited access to the amount of companies that you could use a skydive spot that's actually been designated as a skydive like launch spot. And so they had a bit of a, they could buy in, and it's not like other people could just buy in. And then they kind of just dominated the skydiving industry and got a bit ahead of themselves and started just buying everything, right? They bought, snorkeling boats, and they bought rafting companies. They were worth hundreds of millions of dollars at one point. And then they started buying up a ton of hot air ballooning companies.
They're cash cows.
Right? Cash cows. But I think it didn't work out in the end that well for them because of the simple reason they just kind of got a bit ahead of themselves. They just started buying literally everything they could.
It's
not managing it properly.
You see a lot of companies that do that, that expand too much and don't, even with public companies when they acquire businesses, right? And if you're gonna acquire, it's all about how you do the marketing to cross-sell effectively, using the passengers that already exist from each company. And that's really the value of it, right? So for example, there's the company that's being, sold in California. There's a company that's looking at buying them that does wine stuff. And that's in Napa, right? And it's a little weird. It's like, well, why would they want a balloon company? But if you can cross-sell wine experiences with ballooning, it all fits together, right? It's the same group of people. And when you think about marketing, that's where it makes sense when you're buying a company, is does it give you something else that helps? Unfortunately, in ballooning, like, it requires a certain amount of skill and training, and you need to keep good pilots and keep marketing. When you're trying to market everything, you better have a marketing powerhouse to be able to have that many blog posts, keyword silos, and everything set up appropriately so you can actually rank for all of those. Or you rank for one and then you cross-sell. And they probably just didn't do that well in doing that, and didn't set it up in a way that allowed them to, really grow appropriately. And if you don't understand a sport specifically, you don't know what you need to buy. And, you have a pilot saying you need this and you're not willing to because you're just the business owner. That's probably
also
other stuff that caused issues.
It comes back to what you said earlier a bit as well, right? And you talked about how you built up a fairly robust skill set in many, many different ways and came into the hot air ballooning industry. There's a good chance that these guys were not professional business managers, right? They
were probably really good at skydiving, right? And they were really good at that. And they started having success because they had good reviews. And then they, found someone to give them some money and assumed it would all cross. And I'd say a lot does cross over, but running businesses is completely separate from being a tour guide, and being one good experience doesn't mean the other one will be. And I think that's what, I think excites me about multi-day is, like, you have to create epic experiences on a daily basis for multiple days, right?
Right.
And doing a lot of different activities. And that's where I've always been curious, because I wasn't into multi-day before this. I mean, I was literally just like, great, I'm doing my flights, we're having fun. I've got four full-time pilots. I've got 23 crew. Everything works. It's like a well-oiled machine. And I really was like, well, if this is good enough, I think we can do multi-day, but it's really a totally different animal at the same time.
Yeah, I'm super happy you segued into this multi-day aspect, because I'm curious to know what this guy's name's Buddy. You said he was the greatest tour operator of all time.
All right, so let me tell you about Buddy Bombard. Now,
let's have it.
So Buddy Bombard was started this ski chalet club in the 1960s, and this guy was like bringing people together, like cool experiences skiing. Got into ballooning in like the late mid 70s, and he's like, I should do balloon tours around Europe. We'll fly over castles and like hang out with countesses, and we'll drink wines in these people's wine cellars. And he created the Cappadocia ballooning community. No one had flown in Cappadocia till him.
Right.
Chateau Day in Switzerland, in the mountains in the snow. Now there's 100 balloons together every year for this festival. He started it by doing these like rides to Switzerland, right? And you'd stay at one chateau and high end, fairly high end for the 80s, right? 90s. And then you would go to it, you'd stay there, but you'd go to different places each day to go balloon. And then you'd have like French picnic lunches by private chef. And then you'd go drink wine with a countess. And then you'd meet someone and do a candlelit dinner. I mean, he really understood it. And he was getting celebrities and, royalty, all these people to come with him. And in 1990, he was charging like $8,000-9,000 for a week, which was a lot of money for a tour at that time, right?
Yeah, it's still a fair chunk of coin, even in 2023. So back then, yeah, that's like you could buy half a house for that kind of money.
Exactly. So he was, he was full,
or a car at least,
like full
he was full.
everywhere. And he had 20 pilots. And he had these beautiful balloons. Talk about branding. He had these flower balloons because he said, "Who can be mounted a balloon and flowers?" Right? And he and this was all pre-internet. I mean, he was on Air France on their magazines, and he was everything he could do through travel agents, and he had really figured out the experience. It was about the experience. So what's crazy is, let's say you had bad weather and you only did like 1 or 2 balloon flights. People were still like, this was the greatest experience ever. Because he would literally create it as like, wearing tuxes when they'd fly. And it was ridiculous. But when I look back to who had the best tour company ever, Noah, Black Tomato, all that private jet BS stuff, this guy crushed them and would still destroy him if he was around today. But he decided, you know what? He goes, I'm going to shut it down. This 2002. He goes, I'm going to shut it down and no one will ever fly my balloons again. Destroyed all the balloons, shut down the company because that was his, his deal. He was remembered for it. And after that, no one ever did it again.
What, didn't he just rode a horse off into the sunset?
Pretty much. Like, he rode a horse, he shut down, didn't sell it to anyone. I now own BuddyBombard.com. I bought the website even when it went out. It was, it's really amazing. They retired and passed away this last year, and that was it. And people still are like, wow, that was like the greatest experience of their life. And the people that he worked with, let me tell you something crazy, Matt. If you think about the people that work with you, or anyone listening, you think about the people that work for your tour company, these guys were called the red shirts. They'd all wear red shirts. And these guys were more committed than a MAGA guy today who's still stoked about Trump. That's how his crew was. Could you imagine having that type of crew that's like that committed to you even 20 years after?
Did you know Tourpreneur also has a Facebook community of over 7,000 tour operators? If you are not a member, then search for Tourpreneur on Facebook and join a thriving community of tour operators and other travel professionals, all of whom learn from each other as well as from Chris, Mitch, Pete, and many other industry experts. By becoming a member, you will be notified first of any events, meetups, and exclusive content. Join the Tourpreneur community today. Facebook.com/group/Tourpreneur.
And so when I bought Buddy Bombard, I started getting hate mail from the red shirts. They're like, "You'll never be Buddy Bombard. Why'd you buy a sale?" I was like, this is hilarious. I was like,
wow, they're on top of it.
So committed. It's amazing. And wouldn't we all wish to create an experience like that 20 years later, those guys are still standing up for you? Holy cow.
Right. Yes. Amazing. Yeah, I love it. So how are you going to do it?
So I was like, how do we start this thing? Because I've always wanted to. So I've always jammed with SEO, and I build a ton of content. I use a ton of AI stuff. I'm pretty open about it. I've been using AI to write content for 2.5 years. And now jamming with ChatGPT. But the first thing that I always do is I build out content before I ever start any tours. So we started building them out for multi-day luxury tours. And if even like luxury tours, we started showing up on the first page, like in general on Google, from just like a one blog post we had done about it, and start doing it that way. And then we rebuilt our site So we designed the site so it has like Seattle, Walla Walla festivals and multi-day tours. And the idea is it now allows people to find all those different spaces. In starting out, we're not necessarily looking for random people to come with us. We are starting out with a very curated experience with people that we built with networking over the years in the same way that Buddy built the Chalet Club, right? The Chalet Club was very wealthy people. They became friends with him, went on these ski adventures, and he moved out into the ballooning world. So I've been in the tech world for a long time. So there, you know, I was just at South by Southwest with William Shatner for his for the launch of his new documentary, which is amazing, by the way. And there, we're at the party, and who's there? All the Vulcan guys, Voyager, you know, all these astronauts that have been to space, all these Bitcoin billionaires, all these guys. And I would just share with them what I'm up to and what I'm excited about. They're like, that sounds amazing. For me to fill a 10-passenger balloon at $20,000 a person for 7 or 8 days is not challenging for those first couple. And we're creating those curated events and experiences. Then following that, then we'll open those up to more like general, but they'll still be curated of who's allowed on that tour. And if that makes sense, it's like you want to have an experience where it's the right people, especially with a high value tour like this. You wouldn't want someone who 2 people are 80-year-old and everyone else is 20, right?
Right.
You want to make sure that it's curated. And where I learned that from was the Summit series. Are you familiar with them?
Rings a bell. You're going to have to explain it.
So the Summit series were these like 10 friends in college that were like, you know what, let's like rent this 20,000 square foot house and then let's curate dinners with like famous celebrities and different people and like, you know, these CEOs to create these incredible curated dinners with like 8 to 12 people. And I had the opportunity to go to one in when I was in Los Angeles, working with one of their startups for a while in Santa Monica. And they had this 40,000 square foot house. And they invite me over for dinner. I don't know who's there. It ends up being Peter Thiel, Gus Van Sant, you know, the guy that did Good Will Hunting and Milk. And, you know, this guy from MTV, Eric Lewis, like the best piano player in the world at the time. And it was like so fascinating. And they curated this amazing experience. I was like, this is it. Like, you need to curate. And then the more recent experience I had was I went to Richard Branson's island, to Necker Island. I went last year in November, a little over a year ago. And again, it was curated with the most fascinating people in AI who are making a difference in the world. And I got very lucky to go, and I mostly just hung out with Branson and talked about balloons. But it was the most interesting group I've ever met in my life. Like, we're talking 19-year-olds that had $500 million, you know, people that all sold their companies. People were in the forefront of AI, you know, in medical or whatever it was. And so when you start to realize those groups, those are the groups when you're doing high-end luxury multi-day tours. So it's how do you get to them? You start with those groups, and then you expand as you have amazing experiences, but you're not worried about it being perfect that first time because you also know them a little bit.
Interesting.
And then we'll be in all kinds of, you know, big magazines because we're, you know, we'll do our PR and everything else. And, you know, that world's only hot air balloon multi-day luxury tour. Well, you know, I don't know.
All right. So you must have some pretty interesting and somewhat ridiculous, I don't know if ridiculous is the right word, but like tell us some of the magic you've cooked up for the experiences.
Yeah, so I'll tell you about the one in Seattle because this one we're now that we just started selling, which is great. So we already got commitments, which is wonderful. This one, you start in Seattle, you come to Seattle and we stay in high-end Airbnbs, right? Or luxury homes that aren't through Airbnb, the luxury homes. So each group, and there's 4 to 5 couples in each balloon, and there's one balloon that we do at a time. Sometimes we'll do 2. We'll find out, you know, as we fill them. But in this case, there's 4 or 5 couples. So there's 4 or 5 bedrooms. There's an amazing kitchen. We bring in a private chef. So the first night, 4-course epic meal, and we open a 1960s Bordeaux. So we're drinking old epic wines. We have 2 different chefs. One was on top chef, who's incredible. The other one worked as a Michelin star chef that we're friends with. And then my father-in-law is a French chef who's incredible. So the chefs come in, they cook this amazing meal. In the morning, you fly in front of Mount Rainier. It's epic, right? Flying in front of a 14,000 volcano, have your first flight. It's beautiful and amazing. At sunrise, you land and you have a black car that then takes two black cars that take the 4 couples or 5 couples up to Mount Rainier. And we do a picnic French lunch on top of Mount Rainier, white tablecloth. Then from there, they go to Prosser, Washington. You get in Prosser, you get into your place. We go do an amazing private tour of an orchard you can't tour, right? It's a private friend of ours. You talk about like great experiences, right, that are unique. Then while they're doing that, the chefs make another amazing meal, and that's where then we drink. That's where we bring out the 1964 ports, which are wonderful, along with then Northwest wines. So we have wines from Leonetti, and we have wines. If you're into wines, we have wines from Charles. What's it called? Cayuse Winery, which is like the top in the Northwest and top in the world, and is champagne. So you drink these amazing Northwest wines as you're in the Northwest, and beautiful Syrahs. Then in the morning, you fly over the Yakima Valley. Then you have one more flight. You go to the next day to Walla Walla. You go to these beautiful vineyards. You get to go to these, almost looks like you're in the Swiss Alps, these beautiful Syrah vineyards, right? We do picnic lunches again, amazing chef. And then you fly over wine country, over the vineyards, and meet these amazing winemakers. And then we fly on a private plane back to Seattle. Because we became friends with a guy who has a giant 8 to 10 passenger plane. So we traded him some balloon rides, and he's flying people back, which is wonderful. So that's the experience in Seattle, and it's $10,000, which is probably underpriced.
Probably.
We'll find out what it is. I mean, we still make such a high profit margin. It's a great place to start and to make sure it's perfect, and then we'll start to expand that. And then we run it backwards the other way. So you fly them into Seattle, into Walla Walla, and you run the tour backwards the other way. So if you're not excited,
I'm struggling to process this actually. I just because I love the energy. It just sounds like such an amazing experience.
It really, even just going in a balloon is epic, right?
Yeah.
But being like part of it, understanding the crew, becoming friends, seeing how they fly, like, and getting that high end experience, which is really like being French royalty, because that's where balloons came from, right? Like balloons started in the 1700s, and they drank champagne because they had to hold it beneath the basket so that people would know they weren't a dragon or an army. So everyone was drinking champagne. So it really ballooning and wine and these high-end, like kind of royalty style activities really go together. But This isn't like hey, let's not go on the cruise and go on a balloon tour, like the 80s with Buddy Bombard. This is this is exclusive. So
right. And one thing that you mentioned that I really want to pick up on, you talked about going to an orchard that is not publicly, there's no public access available to it. And that's part of luxury as well, right? Is this kind of the idea that I'm getting experiences that are only available to me through the network of the person who's hosting me.
Yep. And those you have to be really careful with those too, right? Like we can't do them every week. And that was the same thing with Buddy Bombard. He did them in different places because if you were going to go to a countess's castle, he's friends with her. That's why she's letting him do it. Like these winemakers, we've taken them all ballooning. We've become friends and built those relationships over the last couple of years. And now we're like, hey, can we do this a couple times? And that's what takes so long in creating those unique experiences without having to, pay massive amount of money. Because for any amount of money, you can do anything, right? But
yes. Yes. But even if you were to pay that Swiss countess a lot of money, at some point she starts running out of energy as well.
Right. But it's all about what do they get out of it as well, right? Like, do they get something? Are you bringing something of value that they're getting? And it's not like new people are going to buy their wine because they have a wine list that's 10 years long to get on, right? They're not worried about selling more wine, but it's about being about that experience where these people get this amazing experience going ballooning and they get to connect with them and share their passion in a different way than you usually would.
There's like a novelty aspect to it. Isn't it? It's kind of like doing something a bit different. Hey, he's my friend. He's got this cool idea. He's going to make some people.
Yeah, I'll support him too. Sure,
Yeah, they appreciate what I'm doing. It's going to be a bit of fun. But if he starts working up with people every single day, it's like, holy shit, this is a job now.
Yeah, and you can't do it that way. And I think that it's also, remembering that, like, when I build relationships with a lot of these guys, it's not about trying to get something in return. It's really about like doing it just to do it, to become friends with people, right? Because, and I look at ballooning as very much, for a long time I was in ballooning I got a balloon because I used it for sales. Like I used it to build relationships with people who I couldn't get meetings with. And you ask them to come ballooning with you, they're like, really? Like, and they'll either book a meeting with you in their office and talk about ballooning for an hour, or if they come with you, you become good friends with them. And so it was what my mentor said to me. He said, it was the CEO of the company I worked with that got me into ballooning. He said, if someone trusts you with their life, they'll trust you with their money and their business. And I was like, that makes sense. And so that's where I used to use it for. So I still like take people on adventures, asking nothing in return, no expectations, because you're building a relationship. It's not about trying to get something. And if it comes, great. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. You still like build a cool friend, right? And had an amazing experience together.
I'm curious. It's amazing. Pretty much every time you talk, there's like my brain kind of shatters sometimes because I'm like, out of the 4 things that I want to pick out here, which are the 4? So, you had a previous boss / mentor who told you to use balloons. He gave the inside tip to use balloons as a way to get meetings with people.
Yeah, well, what happened was the CEO of the company, he had a hot air balloon, and he'd been flying since like the 60s, right? He's like one of the first balloon pilots in the United States. And he took me flying because I won a sales contest, and we went in Nashville, Tennessee, at Lieber's Fork, went to 10,000 feet, right? Watched the sunrise in the dark, watched the sunrise, came down, landed right next to Naomi Judd's house, right? Like, oh, that's cool. I just hang out with a bunch of celebrities, right? Mm-hmm. Then we go back to his house. He opened in 1997 Silver Oak, perfectly aged, right? Exactly 12 years aged. It's 100-point wine. And he goes, whenever you go ballooning, you got to share an amazing bottle of wine. Don't ever serve cheap champagne. I was like, oh, good to know, right? And then we went, after that, we smoked Cuban cigars, drank scotch, like fished while eating sushi in his stocked pond. I was like, this is like, why do you have a hot air balloon? And he goes, I acquire companies with it. I was like, how? And he goes, it's exactly what we just did. He goes, when you build relationships like that, it works. And it's not about, it's just doing it to do it. And if it works out, it works out. But at least you've built a relationship. He goes, some people go golfing. Some people, you can buy anyone a steak. But there's nothing and no fast way to build a relationship than taking someone ballooning.
I like it. And you took the advice seriously.
I was like, all right. And then he told me about Richard Branson signing Janet Jackson as balloon. And I was like, all right, fine. I think I'll buy a hot air balloon. Twitch my arm.
And this is now what you do.
It's so I have the balloon company, but I also run an AI company too. So with the ballooning, which was weird, I was using live chat back in 2016, using Chatra. And I kept getting people asking these questions, and my wife was getting pissed at me because I'm like in bed at 11 o'clock, like texting people, I'm sure your wife would love you for that. I'm
probably getting sick of it.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, how do I automate this? And I found like you can make a chatbot. This is like 2017, like way early. And I happened to find Drift, which is the top chatbot company in the world. And at the time, they were selling these things for like $300. You can have their platform. Now they're $30,000 a year, right? Like a lot more expensive now. I ended up building this epic chatbot that answered every question about ballooning. And what happened was that I had other balloon companies go, hey, how can we do this thing you're doing? And I thought it was with tour companies building chatbots, and very quickly realized it was actually, I got stuck back selling to B2B companies, working with mid-market and enterprise and public companies, building out these chatbot systems based on what I learned from the balloon company. And then anything I'd learned from one of their systems, I'd apply to my own chatbot of conversion or anything. And at this point, we do consulting on the side for that. And then I built a platform that allows, like, I can use my balloon chatbot. If there's an article in Forbes about me, I can chat with people on Forbes about my balloon rides. And that's the platform that I built. So I do a lot of AI stuff, but the ballooning is my absolute passion. And if I could, and I won't do anything that's not 50% as fun as ballooning. So we're like 51%. So I'm still good right now. But if it gets annoying, I'm out and I'll just fly balloons and see.
Nice. All right, man. This chat has been very inspiring. One of the key things that we talk about internally at my company is this idea of special feeling, right? And it's a term that we just had to make up, right? So special feeling is So when you're reading the tour description, when you look at the photos, it's all about like when people are booking travel, they're kind of there's like a special feeling attached to it, right? And when you're reading a good description, you start to feel that feeling, right? That doesn't have a name. It's just kind of like your heart starts going a little bit. You start to feel a bit of that wanderlust, right? And that's often so much why we get into travel. But like once we get stuck in the trenches, sometimes we forget that. We start to get a bit mechanical. We start just trying to pump out tour descriptions or pump out this or pump out that or just make sure this guy gets paid or whatever. But I always try to recenter myself as much as I can. Yeah, it is about special feeling, right? It's about magic and trying to recapture that magic and try to create magic for other people. I love it. I
think that's hard to do, or was hard, right? Up until like 2 years ago when we started getting AI stuff. I took, there were two things that I changed with my site in the last 2 years when I started working with a new designer and developer. And I'd searched for someone for a long time to find someone who was damn good. And I found this like guy who's just ridiculous. His Falcon design, he's insane. Just a single dude who's just so good at what he does.
He's good. Yeah,
and
I checked him out. Just so you know, I checked him out before we spoke, and he's good. Yeah,
he's phenomenal. And when he goes, Eliav, there's two things that are wrong with your site. He goes, you need photos of happy people. Stop putting just pretty photos of balloons. He goes, you need to show the experience and what it's really like at that moment of that joy and of really people. And I was like, okay, makes sense. So I got him a bunch of people photos, right? And then the other piece was the language, because I'd put in a lot of SEO and a lot of words, right, to make sure that I was ranking, because we started ranking #1 for tons and tons of stuff, right? And I started using ChatGPT about 2 years ago, like through Jarvis, which was like one of the early AI writers, or Jasper, and I just wrote like, use the tone of Robin Leach, right? Like the guy from The Rich and Famous. And I go, use descriptive adjectives. I started like relearning the English language that I did not care about. And I was never an amazing writer. And all of a sudden I was like, use similes, use descriptive storytelling, use like wanderlust adjectives and tantalizing adjectives around descriptions. And all of a sudden, like my words that I already built would turn magical, where the feeling was there, like so powerful. And sometimes I went over the top and then I went back and changed it. And I know you and I even chatted about that, right?
But yeah, that was our first interaction, was me shitting on your coffee.
Yeah. But you know what's funny? The conversion's insane. And people read that and they get the feeling of what it is like. And it's that transference of feeling and emotion is why
that's the most important thing. That's the most important thing. Yeah, for sure.
But I did change some words for you. But now using ChatGPT, the new 4, I have to say, like, I wrote an entire content, like 4,000 word content piece today. That's amazing. And it was
good.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's almost a different episode, right? Like I've been interacting with ChatGPT myself, and it's a skill in and of itself to get it to give you the right output. But yeah, exactly. The transference of feeling is so important when it comes to copy. But that is a different topic for a different day. I really want to thank you for giving us a bit of your magic, man, and inspiring me and hopefully other people who are listening to keep on bringing that creativity and trying to design the best experiences possible, because that's the industry we're in. Yeah. Thank you very much, Eliav. How can people get in touch with you?
Yep. So you can always get in touch with me on Facebook or Seattle Ballooning. If you go to the chat bot and you're like, hey, get me a pilot, damn it. I don't know, whatever you want to say that breaks the chat bot. You'll get me in. I'm happy to always chat with folks, and share information. I think the more you share with different tour folks who run different businesses, you learn a hell of a lot, whether it's, around OTAs or it's around pricing or conversion or whatever. And I think we're all willing to share as long as you're not our direct competitor that lives next door to us. And I think that's what's special around the tour industry, right? Is like, we can share that kind of stuff and it becomes really, really amazing when you do. And so always happy if people want to get in touch with us. And however you want through Seattle Ballooning.
Nice. Cool. Well, thank you very much, Eliav.
Yeah, wonderful chatting with you, man.
Likewise.